So let's wrap this all up. What's the big deal about connection styles? Well, frankly, we're here to make connections with people. We love, serve, connect, and help them transform. Every person that you interact with is going to have their dominant natural way of connecting with the world around them. That doesn't mean they can't connect in other ways. In fact, almost everyone has a dominant way that they interact with the world and connect with the world that have learned how to connect with other people and how to connect with the environment in their not dominant ways. They feel most comfortably when connecting with the world in their dominant means. Let's face it, we all individually feel most comfortable in interacting with others and connecting with others and connecting with the environment around us in our most natural style. We've presented many of them as kind of an either or, verbal or written. There really isn't an either or in the real world. These tend to flow together. Verbal and written communications are two parts of the same type of the world. Verbal communication develops first in infants, written communication develops later. Auditory, well, plays a role in verbal and written communication. Someone who struggles auditorily may also struggle with verbal and written communication because their auditory perception of the world around them may not match others, and they may not hear what others are hearing and respond in the same way as others would. Visual connectors, that doesn't mean they can't doesn't mean visual connectors don't hear what's going on around them. It just means that what they see and how they perceive things visually oftentimes is more detailed than someone who is primarily auditory in the way they perceive the world. And that doesn't mean a kinesthetic person, you can't talk with them and have a conversation with them. It means that their way of getting things done and interacting with tasks and with the world around them tends to be more physical. They will see and hear what's going on. They may choose to type an email rather than talk to you or type a text message because that's a physical response. And just because you're artistic and emotional doesn't mean you don't know how to do math and do numbers. It just means that your preference, for those of us who are going back to neurodivergent, but just because someone who is analytical and rational doesn't mean they're not an artistic person or can't appreciate art and emotions. It just means that their most comfortable way of interacting with the connections around them is more analytical, or someone else may be more artistic. And it doesn't mean someone who is very outgoing can't get along with someone who is less outgoing. And it doesn't mean that someone who prefers to be quiet and left alone doesn't gain energy or connections with others. They just choose to do so in a way that is unique or to them and to the group in which they're in. And there are many intrapersonal people who do very well in very interpersonal situations. It really surprises most people when I tell them that my preferred place to be is at home in my chair with a book and the rest of the world burning down around me, because they perceive me as being very interpersonal because I've chosen to be in a work environment where you have to work with people. I have my whole life. That also, as a classroom teacher for 20 years, has a lot to do with my neurodivergent and why I had such high anxiety, because I loved working with students one-on-one, but also had to be in front of a big crowd, where being neurodivergent and having some unique neurodivergence, I it that environment was very stressing. It can be the same for the people we work with. In the right environment, they're very comfortable. In the wrong environment, it can be very stressing. Especially keep that in mind for oftentimes those who are neurodivergent have just learned in the modern world just to say, please be aware, or they'll refer to themselves as neurodivergent. Or my son, who I can tell when he's having a neurodivergent moment in the midst of his engineering class by the text messages, the jokes I receive, because that's his way of dealing with his neurodivergence. We all find our own coping skills. As an individual, you have your own way that you are comfortable with interacting with the world. So I'm going to share one last piece of advice, and this I gained over 30 years ago from an individual who I spent a lot of time with. Um, in fact, we lived with each other 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and served in the community together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And after having done that for a number of months, he was a very athletic personality, very outgoing, very interpersonal. I was at the time more intrapersonal. I was tended to come across as somewhat aloof and overly intellectual and cold. And in the midst of a conversation one day, he shared this piece of advice that I'll share with you. He said, "I'm not telling you this because I think I'm better than you. I'm telling you that you have a certain behavior that you probably have done your whole life and don't realize other people see or perceive a different way." And it happened to be that when he would ask me a question, oftentimes I didn't respond right away. In his environment, he was used to a quick response. I was more analytical and was taking time to think about what I said. So as you interact with others, it's not that I think that you think you're better than them or they think they're better than you. Just go into the connection as they choose or are more comfortable interacting with the world in a way that may be different from what I'm most comfortable with. I'm not better than them. They're not better than me. We are simply interacting different ways. And the best thing I can do to connect with them is, as much as possible, and still remain comfortable and true to myself, connect with them in their styles of connection. And then they will choose to reach out and connect in your style of connection. And that connection and bond will grow.